everybody out this morning?
Good to see you.
Church is all decorated up for Vacation Bible School starts tomorrow evening. Everybody's invited for that. One thing I always like about our Vacation Bible School is there's activities whether you're a kid or a grown up or somewhere in between. So everyone's invited to come out. All right, before we get started, let's go ahead and go to prayer this morning. I'll ask anybody anywhere if you have a spoken request. All right, Steve. Ruby? All right. Anybody else anywhere? Ronnie?
Remember me and my family, remember my mother, my two brothers, and continue to play with them.
All right. Thank you.
Remember me and my family. I'm not feeling real good today, but remember me, and I have 3 special unspoken prayer requests. And remember the McCoy family. My friend Patty passed away, and they're having her funeral on Tuesday.
Still everybody in Georgia Freeman and her sister, and our nation, our missionaries, our law enforcement, and Russia and Ukraine. And I still have 2 sisters that need special prayers.
Okay.
Mark, still remember all the lost in the family also, and please remember my sister. She has some health issues. She's had cancer in the past and still has issues with that situation, but she just needs our prayers. It's some issues, so.
Hey, Mark, my friend Jerry Dickens asked me to ask for prayer for Herschel Atkins. I work with him with his in Portland nursing home. And another thing about him working for my Bobby Miller, he's a 60 years right now. He's not doing very well.
And also, what I did, I had a call last night that our former sister-in-law, Sheila, I don't know her last name, but she's been diagnosed with liver cancer of the liver. And it's in Morgantown as far as I know right now, but she would call and ask that we remember her. And also, Eileen in her prayers too.
All right.
I have to request, I was at an outdoor singing yesterday, and I don't remember the lady's name other than Amanda, but this woman wanted us to pray for her daughter. She's having some extreme health issues. I don't know what they are, she didn't say, and she's also addicted to meth. So she's in really bad shape, she needs the Lord. Then we was at the emergency room a couple weeks ago and met a lady named Baby Wickline, and she was in heart failure. She has congestive heart failure, but she lives with that, but she had fallen and hit her head, and they didn't know why. She couldn't get out of the floor, and so she was at the emergency room, and they were taking her to Taze Valley. And I don't know anything about what's happened with her, but her name's Becky. And then we got a request for a young lady that's about 30 years old, and she was diagnosed with the same kind of cancer that Leonard had. There's no treatment for it. They just have to go in and get it, and they took like 19 pounds of tumors and organs out of her, and now it's come back and it's on her liver, and they can't get to it because of the scar tissue from the first surgery. She needs a miracle. Her name is Holly Carter.
As you guys remember, my stepdad, his mother passed away over last week, and now he's getting ready to start treatment for prostate cancer, so he's got a lot on his plate. Just keep in mind. And also remember the Meadows family. Clarence Meadows passed away last week. Went to his funeral the other day. Just remember the family as they go through this time. This Meadows used to babysit Hayden when we first got Hayden, so pretty special family.
No, make you grace. I say Bobby Miller, his name's Bobby Lovins. I mean, I do mean Bobby.
God will figure it out.
Yeah.
All right, anyone else with a spoken request?
Mark, remember also, he's got prostate cancer too. I think he may start treatment Tuesday.
All right.
I feel it's pretty important to pray for that team that was on that show. It's a prayer for society because
requests this morning. Try to remember them as best you can. Just look around, see if somebody next to you requests a prayer. Let's just try to keep each other in mind. And as always, let's remember to invite God into our service. That's what we're here for. We should never lose sight of that. Steve, do you mind leading this morning, please? Teaching, I'll ask if anyone's got a passage of scripture or a verse you'd like to read.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Okay. This is out of the book of Psalms, and this is Psalm 70. Make haste, O God, to deliver me. Make haste to help me, O Lord. Let them be shamed and confounded that seek after my soul. Let them be turned backward and put to confusion that desire hurt. Let them be turned back for reward of their shame that say, Aha, aha. Let all those that seek thee rejoice and be glad in thee. And let such as love thy salvation say continually, Let God be magnified. But I am poor and needy. Make haste unto me, O God. Thou art my help and my deliverer. O Lord, make haste. No tarry. O Lord, make no tarry. May God have blessed me.
Thank you, Bruce. Anybody else this morning?
Mark, I have a little bit I'd like to read. Come across this throughout the week there, but it comes out of Isaiah 55, 1 through 3. It says, Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Yes, come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend money for what is not bread, and your wages for what does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me and eat what is good, and let your soul delight itself in abundance. Just kind of what that scripture resonated in me was, we spend a lot of time in this life coveting, wanting, desiring things, and all that satisfaction is only found in the Lord. I've found that over the years, and I've found it true that He supplies the peace that I need. He supplies every need that I have, and I'm thankful for Him that He does that for me. Praise Him.
All right, we'll go ahead and get into the lesson this morning. This one kind of skips around a little bit. If you've got the booklet, it's on page 22 where we're starting this morning. The title of it is The Exodus, and as you all know, we're studying out of the book of Exodus. This is going to cover, our written text this morning is going to cover parts of chapters 11 and 12. We'll talk about them as we go through. As I was studying for this lesson, I couldn't help but think about, sorry, the socks are sliding down. Hold on. Stuff drives me crazy. I couldn't help but think, sorry, Dave. I couldn't help but think about judgment. That's kind of what this whole lesson made me think about, was judgment. Specifically the difference between man's judgment and God's judgment. Everybody agree there's a pretty big difference? When we first think of the word judgment, it sort of puts us in mind of, the guy or the woman in the black robes overseeing some court procedure, and then handing out his or her judgment on the matter, right? That's kind of the first thing that comes to our mind. Now, we feel like their decision is supposed to be based on law or previous decisions, precedents that's occurred on similar circumstances, right? flawless system. I'm gonna ask Kim, anybody ever been involved in the legal system before? You know, these judgments that our legal system makes are supposed to be based on, you know, fair and non-biased, right? Because if they're following the law and what's already been set as precedents, then everything's gonna work out the way it's supposed to, and it's all gonna be fair. Is it a perfect system?
No.
You know, you can tell it's not a perfect system because how many judgments do you ever see that are truly final? You know, there's always some, it's final up to this point, or something's overturned, something's appealed, we decide a different way, it seems like there's not really any finality to it, right? It's all kind of up in the air, it doesn't sound much like a judgment, right? You see sentences reduced, sentences pardoned, convictions overturned, all this different stuff. It doesn't sound so much like a judgment as it does a suggestion. Well, let's try this for a while, and then if that doesn't work, we'll do something different, right? So there's just not much in the way of it being a final judgment, which we think a judgment should be. All right, that's what it was deemed to be, that's what it is. Period. Courtrooms aren't the only place that judgments are made, though, are they? Anybody here make any judgments? We do it every day of our lives, right? Now, we're told we're not to judge. You can judge yourself all you want, but we are not to be judging others, right? But we, us humans, make judgments all the time. We base them on ingrained beliefs, habits, biases, likes, dislikes, etc. They are very subjective. Our judgments are very subjective. We don't base our judgments on anything to do with the legal system or anything like that. We base judgments on so many things. I don't like the way they look. I don't like the way they said this. I don't like the way they dress. They don't act like us. They don't this, they don't that. Those are all judgments, right? Every time we make some evaluation or form an opinion, we've made a judgment. And we do it all the time. Are your judgments perfect? How many times have you found that your judgment was not the right judgment? Probably a bunch, right? You know, we judge on whether or not somebody is a good or bad person, if what they're doing is right or wrong, how they dress, how they speak, what they do, where they go. And we do this, it's not necessarily on what they're doing or what they're saying, but how I feel about it. So our judgments are always pointed back to what I believe, what I feel. Not what you're doing, not what you look like, not what you dress, or whatever the case is, whatever you do, wherever you go. It's whether I think it's right or wrong, whether I think that what you're doing is good or bad. And we all do it, all the time. We know we shouldn't do it, but we still do it every single day. Now, if we've already agreed that the legal system is flawed, how accurate do you think our personal judgments are? Is anybody comfortable with their judgments? Makes us sleep better at night and all that good stuff. It's no wonder God told us not to judge others. We're so bad at it. I mean, you sit and think about all the decisions that we make about people, and we never really think about this, do we? God said don't judge. Oh, I'm not going to judge them. And we feel very pious about it. Oh, I'm not judging. I don't judge anybody. We do it every day. We do it every time we come in contact with somebody. Now, hopefully, as we go through life and get a little maturity to us, I'm not there yet, we start doing that a little less and a little less. That's the goal. You know, I've always been one of these that I always told myself, and others I think could listen to me, I'm a great judge of character. Anybody here think they're a good judge of character? Be honest. Yeah, we're not. We think we are. Hey, how are you? We are not. I think so. You know, if I had some preconception about this, I must be right about it. I've got the ultimate judgment. So I think we can see that man's judgments, whether from on high, the legal system, those people that we put in position to make judgments, or from my everyday opinions, my evaluation of a circumstance or a person or whatever, could use a little bit of improvement, what do you think? Now, what about God's judgments? Are they different from man's? Anybody got any, how do God's judgments differ from man's? Always right. Leaves a little room for mercy, doesn't he? Are we being merciful with one another once we form a judgment? Nah, you're already doomed. If it was up to me, you're gone. You're on your way somewhere else, right? Are our judgments final, or do they get overturned? Do we change our opinions? You know what's funny about us is we're going to have two people that do the exact same thing, kind of act the same way, dress the same way. I'm going to form a judgment on one that's going to be totally different on the other, based on how I feel like they rubbed me that day. You know, I just don't like their looks. I mean, that's kind of what we get back to a whole lot. So, this morning's lesson, I don't know if any of you have read ahead or if you do that on a regular basis and looked at our text this morning. This morning's lesson is very familiar scripture for most of us and gives us a very sobering look about God's judgment. Okay? You know, we're talking about the last plague that God visited upon the Egyptians. All right, so let's read through this. We'll do like we always do. I'll read first verse. You guys read after me. Like I said, it jumps around just a little bit. It's the first 6 verses from Exodus 11 and the first 7 verses from Exodus 12. And then we'll go back and talk about it. It says in verse 1, Exodus 11, verse 1, "The Lord said unto Moses, Yet will I bring one plague more upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterwards he will let you go hence. When he shall let you go, he shall surely thrust you out hence altogether."
Speak now in the ears of the people, and let every man borrow of his neighbor, and every woman of her neighbor, jewels and silver.
And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of the people.
And Moses said, Thus saith the Lord, about midnight will I go out in the midst of Egypt.
And all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beasts.
And there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as they run like it, like it.
And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying,
This month shall be unto you the beginning of months, it shall be first month of the year to you.
Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house.
And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his deed shall make a liquor count for the lamb.
Your lamb shall be without blemish. A male of the first year, you shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats.
And you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill him in the evening.
And they shall take the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts and on the upper doorpost of the houses, wherein they shall eat it. Amen. Everybody in this room watched the old movie, The 10 Commandments. Wasn't that one of the scariest scenes you've ever seen? This whole scene that we just described, I can remember as a kid. Now, the first time I ever saw the movie, I saw it in theater downtown Beckley, I believe. You know, they would play that every so often, the 10 Commandments. But I can always remember that scene that night when the angel of death was visiting Egypt. And all the moaning and the wailing and stuff you heard. It was a dark scene. It was pretty scary, wasn't it? Can you imagine how truly horrific that night must have been across the land of Egypt? You know, we read these things and we look at these things, and sometimes we lose sight of it. This happened. This was for, I'm not reading a novel, paperback that I picked up, and I'm reading it for entertainment. This is history. This is something that happened. What a hope! And it scared the snot out of me when I was a kid watching that scene in the movie. Sorry, Donna. But it was pretty creepy. and I'm thinking, you're thinking, you know, as a grown-up, and you sit, again, I'm almost there. When you visualize this, what a horrific thing this must have been. Now, the other plagues were terrible, but this, I mean, firstborn dropping dead all across the land, right? All right, so let's talk about this a little bit. So in verse 1, he talks about, it said, the Lord said unto Moses, yet will I bring one plague more upon Pharaoh, upon Egypt, afterwards he will let you go hence, and when he shall let you go, shall surely thrust you out hence altogether. I like the way that ends right there. In other words, not only going to let you go, they're going to toss you out. So, just kind of a little recap here to where we are today, and I don't mean to beat this up because, you know, Tim and I alternate weeks, and this is kind of a progression through here. So, in response to the cries of his people, you know, they've been in bondage for 400 years, cried out to God for deliverance from their bondage. God has sent Moses to deliver his people out of the hands of Pharaoh, who's the leader, the ruler of Egypt, and free from their bondage, from their slavery. And they truly were physically slaves. Now, we look back on, you know, you can look back at the history of Israel in a couple of different ways. You know, their bondage, let's take our bondage, caught up in sin, right? And we need delivered from that. We need a Savior from that. These people were literally in bondage. They were slaves. They were doing Pharaoh's bidding, building his cities, his, you know, all of these things, monuments and tombs and pyramids and all this stuff. Pharaoh didn't care if they dropped dead, they were done. They were slaves. It's labor. That's all it is. It's labor. God's people wanted to be free from this. They wanted to live their lives, you know, how they wanted to. They still had in mind, God had promised way back to Abraham a promised land for them. This is not what they thought they signed up for, yet here they are. And so they called out to God, called out to God, called out to God. God hears the cries of his people. God finally at this point said, okay, my people have suffered enough, I'm going to send the deliverer. So he did that in the form of Moses. And I'm not going to go back over the whole history of Moses. Pharaoh obviously is not real keen on letting this workforce go. You know, this is working out great for him. The Israelites, the Hebrews, have grown in population. They're more numerous than the Egyptians. They better keep them subdued or they're going to have some real problems, right? So, in order to help, since Pharaoh obviously doesn't want to let these people go, in order to convince Pharaoh to free the Hebrews, God sent plague after plague to Egypt to demonstrate his power and to cause Pharaoh to release his people. Now, you guys are all familiar with all the plagues that he visited on the Egyptians there. Were they effective? That's what say again?
What did you say?
The plagues. Were the plagues effective in convincing Pharaoh to let his people go?
Temporary.
Temporary. So, you know, Pharaoh saw all of these things that God did. You know, turning the river into blood, the plague of the frogs, the locusts, the lice. I think that was a real eye opener there out of all of those. And yeah.
Steve, I just wondered, did you all see the plague of the crickets out west?
No, I didn't.
Oh my.
Is that going on now?
Well, it may be over now, but I mean, it's just, everything was black, and the roads and everything was black with the crickets. And they said it was, something about the Mormons, plague or something.
You know, we don't have crickets when it's snowing. Just saying.
Four letter words.
I thought of Moses whenever I saw that, cricket thing out there.
So, most people like us, you would think, man, if I saw Moses come and said, I come and speak on behalf of God, the God, and I saw that kind of power, I think, okay, I'm convinced, I'm done. Take him wherever you want to go. Not Pharaoh. What's wrong with Pharaoh? Hardened heart. What does that mean? Hardened heart?
He has no respect for God or anything.
Nothing. No. Certainly wasn't going to listen to God. stuff, but here's a guy who is hard-hearted. He is not going to entertain the things of God. He's not going to listen to the things of God. He's not, this man that claims he's speaking on behalf of God, whatever. My magicians can do all that stuff. We can do this, watch this. We can do. Now, he did that up to a point, and that was okay. But he just refused to hear God's message, and he was unswayed by seeing the hand of God at work. That's a scary place to be. We see God's hand at work every day, if you're looking for it, right? I like to think that as a Christian, I'm always kind of looking to see God's miracles, God's hand at work in things, in my life, in your life, and just whatever. Looking at the world and just seeing how beautiful everything is. I spent a good bit of yesterday afternoon just hanging around down on the river, fished a little bit, and you look at those mountains and the lush colors that you see right now, and if you don't see God's hand in that, you're blind. Your heart is hardened. I mean, it's just that. I think the same thing about snow, and everybody fusses at me for that. If you can't look at a blanket of snow covering the ground and just see how beautiful that is, that's, Betty, I swear, that is God's hand at work.
So is sand.
So it's sand. You're right. So, but here's a man who is just very hard-hearted. He doesn't want to hear any of this, and he was not swayed by any of this. So, here we see in this first verse that I just read, God is telling Moses, you know what? Pharaoh is hard-hearted. Going to send one more plague. He will pay attention to this one. This is a plague that is going to get Pharaoh's attention. And it will certainly, and the way, and I already said it once, but the way he said this is not only is Pharaoh going to let you go, he won't thrust you out. I want rid of these people. Just go, right? All right, so in the next couple of verses, verse 2 and 3, I'll read those together. He says, "Speak now in the ears of the people, and let every man borrow of his neighbor, and every woman of her neighbor, jewels of silver and jewels of gold. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, and in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of his people." Now, I think it's interesting here. I kind of take from this, Pharaoh wasn't even real popular with his own people, the Egyptians, right? Because the Egyptian people apparently did not share the same view of the Hebrews and Moses as Pharaoh did. Pharaoh apparently just had nothing for the Israelites. He had nothing for Moses. They were tools. Something you would break out of the shed, use, put back in the shed at night. So the Egyptian people apparently didn't have that same attitude toward all of God's people. I don't think that they liked them. They were willing to share their, now God calls this to happen, but He calls them to share their wealth, their valuables and things with the Israel, the Hebrew people. They thought of Moses as a great man. They were okay with Moses. They liked him. It appears, when you look at this, that Pharaoh was unique in how hard his heart was towards these other people. Unfortunately, he's the guy in charge. So in order to protect their own selves, the Egyptian people sort of had to go along with him. Obviously his armies, his servants, his people, had to go along with whatever he said. But, you know, the Egyptian people never really rose up against Pharaoh and tried to, hey, let these people go, let them out of here and all that kind of stuff. They're not bad people. All this kind of stuff. So he's the guy making all the decisions. He's the guy making all the shots, calling all the shots. Not a nice guy. All right, so here are the next three verses, 4 through 6. So God has told Moses, I'm going to send, I got one more plague. This is the one that's going to change Pharaoh's mind. So now he starts talking about it. And Moses said, "Thus saith the Lord, about midnight will I go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beasts. And there shall be a great cry Moses what this final plague is going to be. I would imagine, and I'm just speculating here, the Bible doesn't tell us this. Moses even hearing this plague, how do you think, you're the messenger, okay? So let's put ourselves in Moses' position for just a minute, because he's a human being too. He's a man. It's not just some cartoon character we're reading about out of Bible story books. This is a person. You're told that you're going to deliver the message that all of the firstborn of Egypt are going to die. All firstborn of man, all firstborn of beast. How would that affect your heart? Yeah, that's pretty traumatic. The whole thing is, now, Moses was obedient to God, but still, think about that from a human perspective. This plague this is a serious thing that God is doing to free his people. Moses gets this from God. This is what this final plague is. What his judgment on Pharaoh and the Egyptians will be. That's what this is. This is a judgment. This is what happens when you do not hearken to the voice of God. This is what happens when you do not listen to the maker of everything, the universe, everything. All right? Time of negotiations is done. No more warnings, no more pleading, no excuses. This is it. Now, let's go back to what we talked about at the beginning of the class. When we talk about man's judgments, there's all kinds of pleadings and excuses and, oh, let me have one more shot. Give me one more chance. Give me one more this and that. Now, God is merciful, but he has reached the point that this is it. For you guys, this is it. This is my judgment. This is what's going to happen. So God tells Moses around midnight he's going to go out into Egypt and he's going to cause all of the firstborn, man and animal alike, to die. And Moses got to deliver this. He's got to tell Pharaoh this. Think about this with God's judgments. And again, talking about judgment, the difference between man's judgment and God's judgment. Now, Scotty was talking about all these horrible memes that have gone out about the people in the submarine. And I agree with you, Scotty. They're horrible. Most of them seem to focus on, well, that's what happens when you're rich. You know, when you're rich, this is the kind of stuff that happens. The ordinary person's like, you know what? I don't care if you're rich or poor. Those are human beings. That's 5 human beings that were in that vessel that they didn't plan to die that day. They didn't ask for that. You know, so they had the money to do that. Okay, let's be all jealous about it and make jokes about it after that. They had the money to do it. The rest of us can't. Think about judgments in our courtrooms. Does it make a difference if you're a person of power versus a person of no means or little means support in courtrooms? Unfortunately. How about the way we judge people with our eyes, our vision, the way I look at you guys and look out here and see who needs my approval and who doesn't, and you do the same thing. Do they appear to be a person of some means? Do they appear to be a person of cleanliness and uprightness and they're dressed just so and they speak just so, compared to somebody that I might meet on the street in downtown Beckley? Am I going to look at them the same? Probably not. Shame on me. Shame on all of us for doing that. That's not the way God judges. Look at God's judgment here on the people of Egypt. From Pharaoh to the servants. Firstborn's going to die. Period. No in-betweens, no excuses. I don't want to hear anything. There's no more pleading. There's no more begging. This is what's going to happen to everybody. Even the animals. What do the animals do? But anyway, I'm making a joke. But anyway, so that's what's going to happen. God has passed judgment in his righteousness. That's what's going to happen. All right? This is going to be so horrific as this plague starts that there will be a great cry rise from the land like it's never been heard before and will never be heard again. And I think that's pretty accurate. I don't know of reading anything in history. Now, the Jewish people have certainly suffered a great deal of things. Think about World War II and what happened there, and I'm sure a great cry across the world for that. But when this Anybody want to stand in judgment of God hearing this? No, I don't. I don't want to face that kind of judgment. So sadly, though, people, just like Pharaoh, still going to tempt God, still going to defy God, still going to ignore God, don't listen to Him, don't follow His ways, don't obey Him. Seeing what happens with God's judgment for those who don't hearken to His voice, who don't listen to Him, who don't acknowledge Him. Is there an escape? Absolutely. And God provided an escape then for His people. All right? So, if we read on, now there's I think another, 10 verses or so in the rest of that chapter. We're not going to read those. We're going to run out of time before we get done with this, I think. Now we're going to skip to Exodus 12, and again we'll pick up the first 7 verses. And I'm going to read the first 2 together. And it says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." So God speaks to Moses and Aaron. Now remember, Aaron is Moses' brother-in-law. He was kind of Moses' voice. Remember, Moses was concerned, he's a stutterer, he doesn't speak real plainly, he's not a great public speaker. God said, no problem, got you covered. Aaron's going to be the voice. I'll talk to you, Aaron will give the message. So that's who Aaron is. This is the first time we see him in this passage. So he gives him some reassurance. There is a way to avoid this judgment. Okay? That's where we're going here. Today, this very day, was going to be a new beginning for God's people. Think about this. This is the beginning of months. This is going to be the beginning of a new year. What do we look at when we talk about our new year, calendar year? Okay? How do we kind of look at that? New Year's Day. Resolutions. But it's new, right? It's a new year. It's time for me to, that 20 whatever was horrible. Let's go on to 20 next. Whatever that's going to hold. We sort of look at it as a new beginning, right? So here God's people, because of what we're doing here today, because of God's judgment, you're going to have it's a new beginning for you. This is a new chapter in your life. It's a new chapter in the history of God's people. Something big is getting ready to happen here. So what's doom and gloom for the Egyptians and all the animals is a new beginning for God's people. Because you know what? They do listen to God's voice. They call out to God. They've called out to keep this in mind. When God doesn't answer your prayers after the first, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's say the first 10 times you've gone to Him in prayer, ask for a certain thing. You didn't just keep praying for that thing? Or does your mind kind of let that go? Well, I guess that's not whatever, blah, 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 I'm going to go on to something else, or that's not. And sometimes, shamefully, it's what I could ask that same question was, what do we do after the first time we ask God a thing and it doesn't happen? These people cried out to God for 400 years to release us. Please, God, say, that tells us a couple of things right off the bat. They're acknowledging that God is in control, right? Why would you call out to somebody in prayer that's not answering your prayer that you don't think can answer your prayer? You're not going to. Those people were assured God the Father is listening to us. He hasn't listened to us today. He hasn't answered that today. But that doesn't mean I'm going to quit asking. We get very impatient with that, don't we? I'm not going to ask anymore. So they kept going. For 400 years they called out to Him, right? Tell us where we go with that. That judgment for those people of the people that we see today that don't listen to God's voice. I think that we do. We do listen for God. We try to be as obedient as we can for God. And I know we fail, but we try as hard as we can to be obedient to God in all things. Those people today that don't listen to the voice of God, that don't acknowledge the presence of God, that He is God, the judgment that they have coming is just as final as the people of Egypt was. Right? So, God tells them, let's move on. So in verse 3 through 7, I'm going to finish the text here. We're going to run out of time. It says, "Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts and on the upper doorposts of the houses wherein they shall eat." Now that's the end of our text this morning. So God gave Moses and Aaron some very specific instructions on how to protect their households from this plague. So there's two things here right off the bat we can see that they did that was going to save them. Listening to God, obeying God, right? He told them to do these two things. Take a perfect lamb, and I'm going to have to paraphrase real fast here. Take a perfect lamb, keep it up, segregate it for 14 days. 14th day, it's got to be perfect, got to be male, a yearling. If your neighbor doesn't have enough, you know what? We're going to divide it up. We're going to make sure that our neighbors are covered by this as well. Kind of talk about looking out for each other a little bit, right? And then he's going to tell them that on that day, when we kill the lambs, we're going to eat. It's a sacrificial meal. We're going to eat, but we're going to take the blood of that animal that was just sacrificed and strike it on the doorposts and the overhead beam of the door, and you'll be spared. Your family will be safe during this plague. If the Israelites, the Hebrews, had not done that, don't you think they would have fallen victim to the exact same plague that God passed out in the land of Egypt? Absolutely. So, once they did this, then it was just going to the application of the blood on their doorways was the sign for the death angel that God was sending to take care of this, to pass by these people's houses. Now, God, as we know, and I know I'm out of time, I'm going to wrap this up real fast. God's angel of death did indeed visit the land of Egypt that night, did he not? And the firstborn of man and animal alike were slain. I cannot even imagine the cries that, much worse than the movie that freaked me out when I was a kid, but can you imagine that horrible scene of just people just dropping dead? Firstborn, your child, you know, all these things, animals, things that you've worked for. Everything about what you knew in your life and everything that's going on, you're seeing people around you just die. Okay? All except for those that hearken unto God's instructions and obey his word. Now, years later, man continues to judge one another, and God's still going to pass judgment on those who reject him. It's going to happen, right? At some point, when we leave this world, we're all going to stand in front of God to give an account of what we did with Jesus, his son. God sent us the same way of escape as he did these people back in those days, in the form of his son, Jesus Christ. The only perfect lamb sacrificed, not because he did anything wrong, not because we were so great, really because we're so bad. God didn't let his own son be sacrificed, his blood, now applied not to the doorways, but to your heart. Once we put our faith, now think about what a simple concept this is, and we overcomplicate everything. What a simple concept it is, as soon as I profess my faith and accept in my heart that Jesus Christ is my Savior, that blood has been applied. And you know what? I don't have to go through that judgment. God's not going to look back and say, well, Mark, you did this, 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 and this, because the blood of that lamb is going to protect me from that. Why is it so hard for people to just accept that? Anyway, I'm done. I know I'm out of time. I appreciate it, everybody. Hope it didn't bore you too bad.
Good job, Mark. Good job.
harder.